Good morning and welcome to another RRH class. These classes are very much like university classes that I'm so familiar with teaching. They're a lot of fun for us to do, and this is our second class, and we so appreciate your response to our first class. So many positive comments. So many of you are now making biscuits and improving your process for doing so and coming out with lots of success, and that is just exactly what we hoped to accomplish with each and every one of our classes. Now, one funny thing about that first class and some of the comments, we had at least, I would say, 5 people express how concerned they were as they started and listened, as they started that first class and listened to that first 30 seconds where the pictures of me are and the music. They thought that it was a memorial service after my demise. I felt terrible. One person said that she even cried because she thought I was gone. So, you know, best plans. Jim and I sat together, picked the pictures out, picked out the music, and we didn't even think about that. And so those of you that have watched the biscuit class will notice that our 30-second intro is very different. Different pictures, different music. There's an announcement at the very beginning that this is an RRH class. So I hope that clears up the confusion, because I'm still here and plan to be here for years and years to come. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As with any class, it's always a good idea to take notes, be prepared, set aside some time, since these classes last about an hour. I'm not sure this one will be quite that long, but they last about an hour, so you need to set aside time so that you can take the notes. I always do a handout for these classes, and the handout is merely taking pictures of each one of the boards. There will be 3 today. There's 1 on this side, and then there's 2 on the other side. I'll be flipping the board around in a little while. But the board is small. I can't write everything on the board, and so it's going to seem cryptic, especially for people who just do the handout. And they won't understand everything unless they watch the video. So the video clarifies that. So you may want to download the handout, print it out, make that part of your notes, and then just write all over it for a clarification. So today, of course, we are doing apple pie from scratch. Why would I pick this topic for a class at this time of year? Well, first of all, the holidays are coming, and knowing how to do fabulous pies is a part of the tradition for many, many households. Second, it's the end of September, the very end of September when we are videoing this. It won't air for a couple of weeks yet, but we're just at the tail end of our apple season. And while most of our trees are completely done, we have a Granny Smith apple tree that is absolutely loaded. And I went out this morning and picked these apples for us to work with. And apple pies are so traditional for this time of year. And knowing how to do each section of apple pie making can be transferred to lots of other things. The crust can be used for both savory and sweet dishes. And I have 3 outcomes for our class today. Well, actually 4. Making pies is fearful for a lot of people. They feel like they can never be successful because it's so complex. Well, I'm here to tell you that knowledge is power. And that is something that I've told all of my university classes, every single one. Knowledge is power. And when you have that knowledge, it displaces fears. And so we're going to focus on 3 outcomes today. Outcomes are at the end of this class. It is my hope that each of you will have success with pie crust, have success with this filling we're going to do, and success with baking a pie. And there are certain principles that are involved all along the way that we will be going over. So the first thing we need to talk about is, in order to have a really good and successful apple pie, we need to select the best possible apples that we can. So what are we looking for in an apple for apple pie? We want one that has high acid, that has strong flavor. Granny Smith certainly fits in this category. That good balance between tart and sweet, but that really strong taste and flavor. It needs to be firm in order to hold its shape and hold the texture. We don't want to open up that pie and have applesauce because everything has mushed way down. So what are the best apples for that? Well, I have my personal favorites, and sometimes I do a combination of apples from among our trees. I have a couple of trees. I don't know what the variety is because it wasn't, when we bought the house, there was no information on what variety, but there's no mistaking these Granny Smith. So here's our list, and I went across the internet and checked, I don't know, a dozen lists and collected data, and the top 6 that are mentioned in those lists include Granny Smith, Honeycrisp, Brayburn, Pink Lady, Jonathan or Jonagold, and Cortland. And there are others as well, and you can check the internet for those lists and look at those yourself if you wish. Then I wanted to find out which apples we should avoid because they do not have all of these. Some on this side may be high acid, but where they break down is in the strong flavor and especially in holding the shape and holding the texture. And on this list is Fuji. Now, I love Fuji for eating. These are great eating apples and for other purposes. They just don't do as well in pie. Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, Gravenstein, Macoun, and Macintosh. So these are the ones that we want to avoid. What we are going to do today, first of all, we are going to make the crust. Now, I have made another video on my favorite crust, I call it, and I'm going to put a card up in this corner. Watch for the card to appear when we get to the pie crust part, because you can also go to that video and see me doing the same thing. You know, when Jim and I were studying statistics as part of our PhD programs, one of the things that we really liked to do was to go to the secondhand stores and pick up old statistics books so we could read about a concept from this author and then from this author and then from this author. And that helped us solidify what we were learning from our professor in our book that was assigned to the class. So seeing it presented a little bit different, and I never do a presentation the same way twice. So there will be things in that other video that may be helpful and clarify what I'm going to show you today, although they're going to be very similar. So you can check that if you want. And then in that video, I also make an apple pie, but I used my home canned apple pie filling. That's not what we're going to do today. We are making this pie from scratch. I'm going to take a second and flip my board around, and we'll be right back. All right, here is my favorite pie crust. I have used this pie crust recipe for years and years and years. I learned how to make pies when I was a preteen. We had a large family. For Thanksgiving, we produced usually about a dozen pies. And I'm the firstborn in a family of 9 children. And so I was usually the pie maker. By the time I was 14, I was making all of those pies. And I don't even remember what Mother's pie crust recipe was, except that when she used to roll out the pie crust and there was some left, she would roll it into a big round and cut it in little strips and sprinkle cinnamon and sugar on it, and we would have what we called cinnamon sticks. And I know later on, as I became an adult, that Mother always made extra pie crust so that she could do that. That was such a treat for us. In any case, this is not my mother's recipe. I tried several recipes over the years, and once in a while I will try a new recipe to see if I can improve on this. I have never found an improvement over this one. People have different ways of making pie crust, and so if you already have a good pie crust recipe, but you may be struggling a little bit with the procedure, perhaps some of the things that you learn, the principles and hints that I'm going to give with this, will help improve your own pie crust recipe. But let's look at it. 3 cups of all-purpose flour or pastry flour. I have some hints right down here. The first hint, can you see that, Jim?
Yeah.
The first hint is to use the right flour. And the right flour for pie crust is either pastry flour or all-purpose flour. I use King Arthur, or a mixture of the two. Then salt, and then some fat. I use 1.5 cups of fat with my 3 cups of flour. I use 1 cup of Crisco and a half a cup of butter. So this fat can be a variable, just like we talked about in our biscuit lesson. And then the liquid. And I use something a little bit unique for the liquid in my pie crust. And of course, I think that's the secret ingredient that I'm now sharing with all of you. I use a cup of liquid, which includes 1 egg plus 1 tablespoon of vinegar, and then fill up the cup to cold water to the 1 cup line. And then the next hint is cold, cold, cold. Just like in biscuits, we want the fat to always be really cold, and we want the liquid to be cold. And then the third hint is to not overmix. Now there are 2 places where we're going to mix. One, we don't need to worry about overmixing, but one, it's very critical that, unlike biscuits has a lot of leeway in terms of overmixing before the dough gets tough, not pie crust. So we're going to do minimal mixing, and I'll show you how that goes. All right, so we're going to, first of all, do this pie crust, and it has to chill before we roll it out. While it chills, we're going to be making the filling. And then once we can take the crust out of the refrigerator and it's ready to roll out, we will roll out the pie crust, put the filling in, and get it ready for baking. And all along the while, I'm going to be giving you hints and principles, and those are the things that you're going to be able to improve your own success with, and you might want to just write them down to be sure that you have them. All right, so I start with 3 cups of flour. Now, one of the things that will differ in this video than with the card that I'm going to put up right now, and this is favorite pie crust, that's my original, I think I made it 2 years ago, that video, is that I now measure my flour differently. I measure my flour by weight, which is 144 grams per cup. And I went through a long process doing that, and I also am in line with several of the other bakers of artisan bread that I follow. So here we go. I'm going to set my scale to 0, and then because I need 3 cups, and I just right now can't do 3 times 144. Hey Siri, what is 144 times 3?
The answer is 432.
Okay, 432 grams total is what we need. And so I'm going to just I don't need to fluff it. I don't need to do anything to it. 432 grams. All right, we have our flour. Now you may notice that I don't have a mixing bowl here. And that is because I mix my pie crust right on my cold granite, right on the countertop. It is so convenient to do it that way. And actually it's far less messy. Before I started this morning, I sprayed this countertop with Stearamine just before we started this video. Stearamine is a restaurant disinfectant that is used widely in the food industry, and I've talked about Stearamine quite a bit before. So here goes. Here's the flour right on the countertop. Then the next ingredient is 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to sprinkle that over the top. My tool for making pie crust on my countertop are 2 bench scrapers. And I do have these in our Amazon store just in case you want to take a look at them. I want to mix that salt and flour together. And then next comes the fat. Now I've had the fat sitting in the freezer for the last hour, maybe 2 hours, because I want the fat to be cold, cold, cold. So this is a half a cup of butter, and I've pre-cut the butter into chunks. And this is Crisco. This is a cup of Crisco. And I'm just going to drop it by chunks in there as well. Crispy Crisco. Well, it's not crispy, it's crunchy because it's frozen. All right, now I'm now going to cut the fat into the flour, and I do it with these bench scrapers. I want lumps of fat left in, exactly like we did with biscuits if you watched that class. I do not want a homogeneous mixture, so I never do it in the food processor. Some people have great success with doing it that way. I don't. Now, one way that you can get butter, particularly butter, cut in easy is to freeze that butter and then use a box scraper to scrape it in. A lot of people do that. I've done it several times. To me, it's a mess. So I prefer doing it this way. And this way I don't get a box scraper messy. All right, you can see these little dabs of fat throughout the mixture. That is exactly what I want, just exactly. I don't want any great big globules. I think I've gotten all of those. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is make a well. And you probably know what is going to happen here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is this. First of all, I'm going to take my vinegar, and this is my homemade fallen apple vinegar. We have some videos on how we did this, and I'm going to measure a tablespoon of vinegar and put in the bottom of this measurer. Then I'm going to crack an egg in here. An egg from my daughter's chickens. And with a fork, I'm just going to break that egg up, whisk that egg with the vinegar. The vinegar helps the crust be tender. It also gives it a nice little, just a little hint of a tang in the crust, and I really do like that taste. All right, now I'm going to go over to my refrigerator and fill it up to the 1 cup mark with cold water. There's a lot of foam on the top there. I had to be sure I read it right. Now I'm going to pour just a little bit, well, not all of it at the same time. I'm going to pour it in gradually and then mix as I go. I'm probably going to put about half of it in because we never know how much liquid it's going to need. And what our ideal is here, that we want it to be soft enough and malleable enough so that it will roll out, and yet strong enough that it will hold that filling. And we don't want it to be heavy so that it gets all soggy on the bottom. Now what we're looking for is to get it to a point where it will hang together, and it's still going to look quite crumbly at that point. So here comes some more water, some more liquid. I'm leaving a couple of tablespoons in there. This might be enough. And it is. So this is done. And when I get to this point, and I'm showing people, they're saying, oh, it can't be done. It's not hanging together. Well, but it will hang together. And that's the thing. You have to recognize the potential of the dough to hang together before it actually does. And that's where people add too much liquid to pie crust. So what do I mean by hang together? All right, now do you see how I'm pressing things together here? And I'm not using my hands because my hands are warm and I'm wanting to preserve the coldness. Okay, now this is hanging together because I can press it and it won't crumble. This is enough for 3 crusts. Now I'm going to layer this on top of itself. Still hanging together. And I'm going to, oh yeah, that's plenty soft enough. So I'm going to now
What were you feeling for when you...
softness.
Okay, and softness.
Softness as opposed to crumbliness. If that crumbled instead of compressed in my fingers, I didn't have enough liquid in it. So when I pinch it and it stays together and I feel a little bit of sticky on my fingers, Jim, that was such a good question, then it's good. Okay, so I have this. It's been folded on top of itself once. That's enough. It's hanging together. Now I need to divide it into thirds. No, I'm just going to, I usually don't do this, but I think I'm just going to find out how close I was. $332, $320, $330. Okay, I'm making these into little mini bricks. Each of these is going to go in a plastic bag. One is going to go in the refrigerator for us today, and 2 are going to go in the freezer. And this recipe freezes beautifully. No, I need 2 today. It's an apple pie, duh. I was thinking pumpkin. So 2 will go in the refrigerator. And 1 will go in the freezer. And this is good for about 6 months in the freezer. It does not take them very long to thaw. All right, I'm going to clean up, put these in the refrigerator. This one in the freezer. I am going to clean up, and when we come back, we will be making the filling. Our pie crust has been in the refrigerator about 20 minutes, and it still needs a few more minutes. So we're going to go ahead and get busy on getting the filling done. Now, I have a recipe for filling, but it is so variable. You can vary it according to the spices that you really like. So here it is. It takes about 4 pounds of apples, about 8 large. I have 10 apples here that I picked from my tree this morning. I thought they were pretty large, but this is 4 pounds of apples. We'll see. Once I get it in here, we can have a better idea of whether or not. I would rather have too many slices than not enough. And so we may have some leftovers. Oh dear, they're really fun to just snack on raw when they're like that. So what we are going to use as a sweetener for these Granny Smith is a half a cup of sugar. And because Granny Smiths are so tart, if I wanted to, I could even add a little bit more sugar. But we quite like it just the way it is. I'm going to add a teaspoon of cinnamon. And again, you choose what you want to use. A lot of people have specialty things that they like in apple pie. Now, I really like nutmeg. A lot of people don't put nutmeg in their apple pies, but I do. And I don't put a lot. I just put about 1/4 of a teaspoon. I think that's what I have down. Yeah. No, I have a half a teaspoon. Oh, that's even better. A half a teaspoon of nutmeg. And then 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Salt is just a flavor enhancer here. Then I'm going to just mix the spices with the sugar. And we will be sprinkling this over the apple slices when we get them ready. All right, that is ready to go. I'm going to take this red bowl. My trash can is right here. And I can just put this red bowl right here, and it is supported on the top of the trash can because I'm going to be putting my peelings right into that bowl so that I can put them in the compost pile, or I would feed them to chickens if we still had chickens. Now the next is to get the slices ready. The quickest and easiest way from my perspective is to use one of these apple paracord peeler contraptions that I don't know how I ever managed to do apples without these. I've been using this contraption for about 30 years. I've been through probably 3 or 4 of them. This one is now getting pretty iffy, but it peels and I can just put the peel like that and it will go directly down into that bowl. Now you may have noticed on the opening slide, I have a little worm popping out of the apple that I made, and I am no artist. Getting rid of the peel, and then I simply cut this whole thing in thirds and drop them in the bowl. So that's about how the slices are, about that size. Some people like them more chunky, and when they do, this doesn't work. But there are other, if you're seeing this, it's a spider bite. I've had it for 3 weeks. I just wish it would go away.
You mean I didn't bite you?
It wasn't Jim, I promise. Okay. So I have this up in our Amazon store so you can see it. This is the most recent one I bought. It seems to be working fine. I think I've had it probably 5 or 6 years. I wear them out pretty fast with all of our apple trees and the processing of apples that I do. And I'm checking for worms because even though we did spray, we still got worms. We never used to even have to spray for the first 10 years that we lived here, but we've had people move in who have apple orchards as well, bigger apple orchards, and somehow the worms followed them. So we're done with the apples, and here are the leavings. I will be putting these in the compost pile. I have made, you could make vinegar with these, now that I know how to make vinegar, or with red apples, red peeling apples, I usually do, or I have done, apple peeling jelly, which is really, really good. Now, you may have noticed that I forgot to put the flour in this little mixture that we have here. And that flour is for the thickening. That's what is going to thicken the juices that are going to be forthcoming as the filling cooks. So we want these to be mixed completely. Now I'm going to be pouring, and I didn't use the last 2 apples. I always eyeball it anyway. I have never measured 4 pounds because I wasn't sure how many pounds eyeballing it is. I went to a couple of recipes and I took their 4 pounds, but I just eyeball it usually. So we now stir up these apples. We want them coated completely with the sugar flour mixture. And what is going to happen as we start making the pie crust and these sit is that the sugar is going to draw liquid out of the cells of the apple. And this mixture is going to become juicy. And that's exactly what we want. That's going to be forming the juice inside the pie as it bakes. And then the flour is going to thicken that juice so we have a wonderful filling that is just the right consistency. And these apples, when they are coated with the cinnamon and the sugar like this, ooh, they're so good.
You dropped a couple.
Yeah, I know. So I think we have plenty here for a 9-inch pie. And it depends on how sky high you like to go with your pies. Okay, we're going to set this aside, let those sort of juice up, and I am going to steramine where we're going to be doing the pie crust. Just wiping it with a paper towel to spread it around, give it a second or 2 to dry. Great thing about steramine is Clorox kills on contact, but that's it. Steramine kills on contact and keeps killing on contact. It will keep killing the bad bugs, so to speak, for hours afterward. Okay, we are ready for our pie crust. Rolling pie crust can be a little bit tricky if the pie crust is not at the right consistency. So this is an opportunity for us to check that consistency to be sure. And by the way, this is not going to be picking up any of the steramine. The steramine is dry. So we'll get this out and I'm going to just shape it into kind of a ball. I want to flour it all around. And if I needed to add a little extra flour right here, I could just work more in. I don't want to touch it much with my hand. Now, when I was using the bench scrapers to work in the fat, that was not part of our overmixing. When I was pulling it together and getting it in the loaves and not touching it with my hands, that is the part where we don't want to stir and stir and stir with a fork until it's all the same consistency. That's when overmixing occurs. Okay, now I'm just going to flatten this down. And one of the things that I want to share with you is that I always double check, even in progress, to make sure that I have a good coating of flour underneath the pie crust so that the pie crust is movable and not sticking to the counter. So I'm going to just start rolling this. Going from the center outward. Checking for movability. I want this at about 1/4 of an inch. And you will see now all those dots of butter and Crisco that are in here. Ooh, this is so exciting. This is exactly what we want. Can you see those, Jim?
Yep.
Okay, we're ready to get this in the pan. This is the pan that I have used for more than 30 years for my pies. It is a metal pan. Some people swear by glass. I have not had good luck with glass. If you have great luck with glass, keep on doing it. It is important for each of us to find what works best for us. But these darker metal pans work so well to get the right color of browning on the pie, to make sure that that bottom crust gets done so that it doesn't go soggy. And then flipping this over. And then we want to make sure that we're not pulling up on the crust. Pulling up on the crust stretches it and it would pull back down. And that's just what we want. We want to give the crust all of the tension that it needs to stay in place and not misbehave. Okay, so that's what that bottom crust looks like. Now, I usually just go around the outside with a knife and cut right to the edge, and I'll show you why I do that. Sometimes if I haven't left the tension the way it needs, it pulls in a little bit right here, but that's, now this is what my mother would have made cinnamon sticks with. Okay.
So you're not going to make cinnamon sticks?
Honey, I'll make you cinnamon sticks. So now we spoon our filling in. And I don't know if you can tell how juicy these are now, but that's what the sugar has done, is made them really juicy. Oh, this smells so good. We want them evenly distributed. Oh, look at that juiciness.
That looks fantastic.
Oh, I know.
It's going to be a good apple pie.
You think? Would you volunteer to be a taster?
Oh, I could do that. I could be a tester. Or a taste tester.
A taste tester. All right, so we're going to leave it like that, and look what we have left. I almost had enough for 2 pies there. It's a good thing I didn't do those other 2 apples.
We can figure out something to do with it.
Oh, I'll show you what we're going to do with it.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Oh, that sweet with the cinnamon and the nutmeg is such a nice match with the tartness of the Granny Smith apples. Okay. Set this over here. Top crust. Shaping it into kind of a round. I'm not kneading it. I won't knead it. We don't want to activate any of the gluten, not in pie crust. And we haven't. Okay, rolling this out. The little blobs of fat that are there are going to make this crust so flaky, so tender. All right, I think that's probably good. We have quite a height there. I may go just a little bit more. Okay. Now, we'll need to slash the top crust so the steam can escape. How you do that is a very individual choice. I do it the way my mother taught me to do when I was a preteen and then up to 14, and I have done it that way for 75 years. Well, I didn't start when I was 4 years old, so for 65 years. So I just come to about the middle, and I do about 4 slashes either side of middle. And then I come along the side and do about 3 more. And that's what I do. But you can do it any way that you want to. And so I'm carefully lifting this up, and the slashes go right over the top. We flip the top crust all the way over. And then I want to, oh, I forgot the butter. So we're going to open it up again, half at a time, and I'm going to dot this with butter. I have 2 tablespoons of butter on this empty butter box. And this helps make that juicy, tangy, wonderful juice on the inside. Then what I do is I'm feeling with my fingers where the edge of the pan is, and I want to come out about a finger's width overhang. So I'm going to go all the way around. You can do this with scissors. I've always done it with a paring knife. So that I have some overhang. And this is called, we're getting ready to flute the pie crust, which is to finish the edge. And what we want to try to do, hopefully, is to seal the juices in. Although with apple pie, sometimes it is difficult and it will run over in your oven. More cinnamon sticks, Jim.
Oh, it sounds like a great idea.
Then the next thing, oh, I've got to turn the oven on, 425. So what I'm going to do is capture that bottom crust and pinch it in the middle of, I'm making a sandwich with it, so that that bottom crust is now enclosed top and bottom by this overhang. I usually don't have to use a knife. Usually it's out at the edge there, but I think it shrunk just a little bit when I was cutting it. But it will be fine. Now we're going to flute the edges. At this point, you can mash it with a fork. That works just fine. But I love to just do this cute little fluting that my mother taught me to do. Mother had the most beautiful hands. Her fingers were long and slender. Unlike mine, I got my dad's hands. I'm a piano player, so I have a big reach. I can reach an octave in 2, but they're not beautiful, long and slender, ladylike hands. I have man hands. It's never bothered me. And so there we have our pie ready to go into the oven. So, ooh, I can't wait. Because I had to open it up again to put the butter in, these little slits have stretched out of shape just a little bit. But I don't think Jim will care. I think he'll taste it anyway. And probably by tomorrow, this pie will be all gone. So just as soon as the oven is ready, we will put this in the oven. Now, some people, especially I think if you use a glass pan, you're going to want to put a baking sheet underneath and preheat it with the oven so that you will put your pie down on that hot sheet, and that will help glass pie tins, pie plates, get a nice cook on the bottom so that the bottom crust doesn't get soggy. So we're going to wait for the oven, and then we're going to put this in, and then we will come back when I'm taking it out of the oven. Now, what we want to do with our cook time, I've set it for 425. We're going to cook that for 15 minutes, and that is so that we can get a jump start on getting the crust cooked to prevent sogginess. Then that's too high to finish the cooking. So we're going to lower the temperature to 350 and about 30 minutes. Now it's done when the crust is all nice and brown and bubbly. Some will probably bubble up through some of these slits that we made. And if it boils over, I'll probably need to slip a pan in there to catch those drips so it doesn't make a mess of my oven. And so we will be back when this is coming out of the oven. So I just took this out of the oven, hot, and we did have some leaking here, and we did have some in the oven actually, but it's not too bad. So the crust is a beautiful, beautiful golden brown. The edge of the crust is not too browned. Sometimes if it starts getting too brown, you can fold a little edge of tin foil around here, aluminum foil, to prevent that, but this is beautifully golden brown. All of the fat spots are gone. Sometimes you can see the little dips where they were, but in order to just kind of cover that, I sprinkle my apple pies with sugar. And sometimes I get that sugar that is large grain sugar that looks so nice on pies, but I don't have any right now, so I'm just going to use this. In just a few minutes, after it has cooled some, Jim has volunteered, bless his heart, at great personal sacrifice, to come and be our taste tester. He's over there laughing. You might notice that I also made some cinnamon sticks. This is what they look like, and 2 of them are missing. I have no idea what happened to them. Jim, would you care to share?
I wouldn't. I'm not guilty. I don't know anything about it.
All right, so we're going to give this a while to cool, and we'll come back for the taste test. I love it when you put the camera on the tripod so you can come and stand with me and be in the video.
So romantic.
I know it is. So here's this pie. What do you think we should do with it?
I don't know. Maybe we need, I don't know, maybe put some cream on it or
No,
something.
no.
Whipped cream would be good.
So we're ready to go ahead and taste this pie. Now, since the camera is on the tripod, there's no getting a close-up, but the fluted edges of my pies usually look a lot better than this one. I kind of lost the edge of the under crust, so it's always good in these classes. We are going to diagnose, regardless of whether it turns out great or turns out not so great. I want to talk about anything that can be improved so that you can learn from what we do too. So next time I will leave that under crust just a little bit larger and longer off the edge of the pan so I can really sandwich it between the 2 edges of the top crust. But really it's not going to affect the taste at all.
Okay, I can go back on the other side and you could lift the pie up a little bit if you want so we can get a close-up. Want to do that?
Sure. So it's okay, it's plenty okay, but usually I like it. I like the pies to be pretty as well as tasty. So this one falls short on the pretty part just a little bit, but I think it will be fine according to taste. So come on back, Jim. Okay, so here we go. I can tell the crust is just so flaky.
Looks kind of flaky too.
Really flaky. So you want about this much?
That works for me. Yes.
Getting the first piece out is always a challenge. All right, so here it is. What?
Well, I was going to tip it down a little bit.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
take a taste and analyze what the bottom crust looks like.
Looks like or tastes like?
Well, tastes like, but it needs to make sure that it's not soggy, and it should be kind of browned.
It doesn't feel soggy when I cut it. It doesn't taste soggy.
So I'm going to try to get a look at the under crust. So there it is, nicely browned all the way around, not soggy at all. Okay, I'm going to take a taste as well. All right, the apples held their shape and their texture. They're not mushy. You can still taste the individual slices.
The individual slices, they kind of fall apart a little bit while you're eating them.
And with this particular pie, I would increase the sugar just a little bit. It's a little tiny bit tart for me. Do you like it that
I
tart?
kind of like it that way.
Okay.
There's plenty of sugar in it from my point of view.
Okay then. So now I'm going to taste the crust. Tender, flaky,
Flaky.
flavorful.
Yeah, that works.
Are you happy with it?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Very happy with it.
So this concludes our second lesson. One of the things that I really like about this pie crust recipe is that it makes 3 crusts, which is perfect for us for Thanksgiving. That gives me enough crust for 1 apple pie and 1 pumpkin pie. Unlike the years of my youth when I was making a dozen pies with our smaller family locally, with the people that come, 2 pies is usually enough.
Normally, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, so I hope that you have learned some things this time that will help you have success with crust and with this particular filling, and also for baking, so that your pies will not have soggy bottoms and be beautifully browned in the oven. So thank you so much for being a part of this class. Be sure that you leave comments about new things that you learned, and then come back after you've tried some of the things and give us an update on how your pie adventures are coming along. So thank you so much, and we'll see you very soon for another class.